Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Sommelier of Cinema, your Master of Fun and Wonder. Did I already say that? And of course, as we all know, boy, I love doing this, your existential Mr. Rogers. By the way, this artwork was by Xevious, and he sent it to me via Twitter. And how can I not love seeing Rigel and a Federation shuttlecraft and me as Mr. Rogers? I don't know. I want to thank Xevious for doing that. Every time I put it up, I always forget to thank him, but I want to thank him anyway. And welcome to Robservations episode number 390, ladies and gentlemen. 390. You know that means we're just 10 episodes away from... Well, that's right, episode 400. And I'm trying to line up some interviews. I was thinking about going down the lines of what John Campea did and maybe doing an all-charity episode for episode 400. I will try and go on for 400 minutes. That's the plan. But I also plan on having packages of interviews that I've been lining up. Should be pretty exciting, actually, the people that... if I can get them all done. So it'll all be live, but I will be playing pre-recorded video packages in that. And I was also thinking of doing like every hour a different charity. I was looking at, you can go to like Charity Watch and find what the best charities are for COVID-19 relief, who needs it most. John, obviously, the John Campea show, he did that on Friday, and was able to raise over $12,000. Now, obviously, not all of that $12,000 can go to charity because some of it is taxable, and there's other issues, but a lot of it can, which is great because we can give it right away. It's like if through the tips, super chats you have to wait, but if through the tip feature, it can almost be same day delivery if you wanted to do that after you figure out various things. So it is a great way to do it. I haven't figured all of that out yet, but that's kind of what I was thinking. I've been mostly concentrating on getting the interview packages done in advance, so that would allow me to get up. I'm trying to do at least half-hour interviews so I could get up over the course of those 400 minutes and do what I need to do, whether it's eat or rest my voice. So we're thinking about that. I'm thinking about that. I don't quite know yet how it's all going to work, but I've got 10 days to figure it out. And being that the Hills Run Red Blu-ray should be completely delivered by, well, tomorrow. I don't know why my lights are freaking out. My lights are freaking out. It's freaking me out. Uh-oh. Well. Maybe there's gremlins afoot in here. Who knows? Anyway, this is Robservations 390. And, there's a lot of wacky stuff happening in the entertainment business. There's a lot of wacky stuff happening all over, but there are some particularly wacky things. I wouldn't say wacky, but certain things that are giving me pause. Obviously, on the John Campea show this morning, we were talking about AMC exploring their bankruptcy options for bankruptcy protection, which I was saying on the show, it's probably a very smart thing to do if you're a business owner, that you have to look into every option available to you during this time when the economy is basically shut down. And no doubt the economy needs to come back. But until the situation is optimal to do that, I mean, we've seen it. We now have South Korea being a model example of how to do that. You have to test everybody. You have to test everybody, and those people that don't have the virus can go to work, and those people that show symptoms or they're asymptomatic but they still have the virus in them, they have to be quarantined. And that's, to me, it's pretty cut and dried, and we've seen it happen correctly. If you were to reopen the economy too early, everyone's just going to get reinfected, and you're back to square one. All of the social distancing in the world, you'll just have to go back and do that again. And nobody wants to do that. But until we can test everybody, we're not going to really know. So who knows when that will happen. But in the meantime, a lot has been going on. Now, the first thing I wanted to bring up is we now have some numbers. Obviously, the Trolls World Tour did not go theatrical the way it was supposed to. And because of that, they released it direct to video. I mean, direct to digital, direct to streaming. You could get it at home. Now, what's very interesting is right now, we don't yet think of brand new movies that we can get them right away, day and date, at home. This would be a new way of thinking in terms of consumers. They've been trying to come up with ways to do this for a very long time. In Hollywood, obviously, we've got pay-per-view fights, and people are used to that. That's a paradigm that already exists. But what we need to do, or what Hollywood needs to do, is create that same awareness in the minds of all film goers or all consumers. Now, do I want this to happen? Let me flat out say no. I love movie theaters. I love going to movie theaters. I love seeing films on a big screen with a big sound system. I like going to the refreshment stand, the lobby. I like buying popcorn. I like buying candy. I like having a big soda. Is it overpriced? Sure. But to me, that's sort of the cost of doing business when I'm going to the movie theaters. I understand that I will be paying those premiums if I want to do that. But to me, it's all part of the experience, and I know that that's part of the business that's being done. So it's never been something that's really bothered me. But what I am paying for first and foremost when I go to movie theaters is to see a big image, well projected, in a auditorium that has a phenomenal sound system, so I have the optimal film going experience that I can possibly have. I want something, even though I have a home theater system and speakers and a nice size screen, not a projector, but a nice size screen at home, going to the movie theaters should be substantially better. And I think a lot of people, I like the collective experience sitting with a room full of strangers that are affected by a movie, but that's because I grew up that way. And if that were to suddenly go away, I think the people that love it, like myself, would lament the loss of our beloved movie theaters, but people would adjust. So the idea of movie going is always something that needs to be protected, especially by the companies that own movie theaters. Well, right now, there's nothing they can do. AMC is fighting for its life, obviously, as are all movie theaters, as are many businesses. I read an article yesterday about the economy in general, and the forecast was pretty dim. Everything from real estate to small businesses was pretty dim, other than for those companies that have large cash on hand reserves. Same old, same as it ever was. But a couple of things that have come out in the last day that I thought were interesting sharing. The first is this article. We talked about this on the John Campea show about the Trolls World Tour. John said that he had heard from one of his contacts at the studio that it wasn't that impressive. But in Deadline today, 9:29 a.m., when we were already on the show, April 13th, today, this article by Anthony D'Alessandro on Deadline says, Universal is still collecting data for its digital rental release of DreamWorks Animation's Trolls World Tour this past weekend, but it's believed to be a record weekend and opening day digital rental. Here are the benchmarks indicating so, even though retailers will provide full dollar amounts in a weekly flash report down the road. Trolls World Tour did 10 times that of Universal's previous opening day digital champ, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which, according to home entertainment sources, did around 2 to 3 million stateside on day one. Avengers Endgame, per sources, had a first digital domestic rental week of 30 million in flash reports, and the extrapolation off first day numbers is that Trolls World Tour will far exceed the figure amassed by the Russo brothers' directed sequel. Now, remember, both Jurassic World and Avengers Endgame had already come out in theaters. Trolls World Tour did not. What Trolls World Tour is a dry run for being able to release a studio movie direct to this market. Other indicators of success over the weekend. Trolls World Tour is the #1 title across all major on-demand platforms, topping expectations on digital distributors including Amazon, Comcast, Apple, Vudu, Google, YouTube, DirecTV, and Fandango Now. Apparently, studios typically don't report video revenue because there's no central efficient means of monitoring in real time like CinemaScore's box office data system, a reporting crossway between theaters and studios. Home entertainment monies usually are reported by several outlets, i.e. Google Play, cable systems, and such figures are often delivered in weekly flash reports to the studio. That said, digital revenue reporting is possible. Showtime has reporting pay-per-view dollar and viewership figures for its pay-per-view boxing matches. It's just often been delayed. The 600 million or 4.3 million views that pay-per-view generated from the August 16th, 2017 Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight was reported by Showtime 4 months later. If pay-per-view boxing revenues and stats can be ranked, so can major digital titles. And if this is the new normal, it only makes sense that studios are held accountable. Netflix will occasionally report on Twitter what their biggest views were for a movie or title, i.e. Bird Box or Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston's murder mystery, but it's on company faith value that we digest that. Nielsen has independently tracked Netflix viewership, recently reporting that its docu-series Tiger King drew 34 million views in its first 10 days. Trolls World Tour received a marketing push akin to a theatrical release, and that's because Universal was already knee-deep in promo partner, merchandise, and TV spot commitments. It's for that reason that Universal opted not to push the Walt Thorne-directed movie on the theatrical release calendar, but to embrace a largely VOD and home launch in the current COVID-19 climate that has shut down movies nationwide. Trolls World Tour was promoted through Comcast Universal Symphony program, which only select event theatrical titles receive in a given year. This entails that a Universal movie is being pushed across the conglomerate's entire portfolio, i.e. Trolls balloons in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, the re-airing of the Trolls Holiday Special on NBC, along with custom pieces on NBC Universal Cable Networks, Bravo, E!, Universal Kids, USA, Telemundo, and Sci-Fi, and an expanded Xfinity co-branded campaign. Publicity highlights during launch week included appearances by Trolls World Tour stars Justin Timberlake and Anna Kendrick on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, The Kelly Clarkson Show, and On Air with Ryan Seacrest. 3 movie trailers for the sequel have amassed over 130 million views. Timberlake promoted the film twice on Ellen, joined most recently by Anderson .Paak and SZA, whatever, where they kicked off the Trolling for Good campaign to raise funds for the Little Kids Rock charity. Online and social media pushes included a Which Troll Are You AR lens that drew 331,000 impressions, the Smooth Jazz Chaz TikTok challenge with 6 top influencers acting out the I Can't Feel My Face moment from the film, a Tiny Diamond dance challenge on TikTok, and mobile gaming specifically targeting moms and kids, among other campaign elements. What's important about this is that Universal knew that this movie was going to go directly to, after COVID broke out, they closed the theaters. This is going to be basically an experiment. Could Universal do this, use their standard theatrical marketing methodologies to push this film out, and would they have achieved any kind of success doing so? Now, did this movie gross, or is it making what it would have made theatrically? No. But this is the beginning. It is the beginning of a new paradigm, and ultimately, it's something that once people get used to doing it, there's nothing to be. Look, $600 million on a pay-per-view fight for Showtime, not something to sneeze at, and it's just we haven't seen this work yet. I'm not going to say it's going to work well tomorrow, but it's definitely something that right now is definitely in the offing, and it's something that can happen. Now, there was something else reported on Deadline today that I wanted to follow up with, and that is this. As pandemic hobbles exhibitors and studios, Screening Room rechristened SR Labs with dollars and Manjit Singh, new CEO. 4 years ago, the in-home day-and-date venture Screening Room polarized exhibitors and studios, even as its backers and superstar director shareholders promised windfalls as high as $8 billion in annual revenue to be split between movie makers and exhibitors from the affluent but homebound 25 to 39-year-old demographic. This disruptive venture is back with a new name, SR Labs, $27.5 million in equity financing, and a new CEO and former Sony Pictures Home Entertainment president, Manjit Singh. Given the current climate, it seems a model worth reconsidering. Founder and ex-SFX Entertainment and JP Morgan Entertainment Partners honcho, Prem Akkaraju, has been elevated to executive chairman. Ex-Intel and Microsoft exec Jim Baldwin continues as chief technology officer, and they head up an advisory board that consists of Napster, Facebook, Spotify investors Sean Parker and Jeff Blake, the former Sony Pictures chairman of worldwide marketing and distribution. SR Labs said it has been issued 11 domestic and 25 global utility patents that its backers believe has strengthened its guarantee of a secure and safe from piracy delivery system through set-top boxes that will retail for $150 and will allow customers to spend $50 to watch brand new films each Friday as they open in theaters. Despite the argument of its backers that the service would not harm existing box office revenues, and despite impassioned endorsements from filmmakers including Peter Jackson, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and J.J. Abrams, who signed on as shareholders, and despite rumors of a letter of intent signed by leading theater chain AMC, the industry largely spurned Screening Room in its first go-round. Filmmakers like James Cameron and theater owners believe that it would hurt the movie-going industry, with some using words like doom. The architects of Screening Room made their case to exhibitors at CinemaCon that year, but clearly the business wasn't ready to consider a major change to the traditional theatrical windowing system. Indie theaters aligned with this effort, signing an open letter against the venture. The world looks very different now. Not only because of the continuing infiltration of streamers offering movie-quality in-home original programming, but especially because of a global pandemic that has shut theaters up tight and has sent debt-heavy chains like AMC teetering toward Chapter 11. In an eloquent conversation to explain why he went from a skeptic to a believer in the Screening Room technology could boost the health of both sides of the movie-making experience by injecting $8 billion to $10 billion in revenue from an affluent but homebound 25 to 39-year-old demographic, Peter Jackson firmly believed Screening Room could be an important lifeline not only to the health of movie makers, but also theaters that would receive the equivalent of 2 ticket sales for each $50 purchase, along with $6 for concessions. As it is now, theaters have been completely cut out of the revenue picture as film studios opened films from Bloodshot to Trolls World Tour directly on VOD after theaters shuttered for around $20 per in-home purchase. Even after theaters reopen, it will likely take time to restore customer confidence in moviegoing, and streamers will have had the better part of a year to assert themselves as a viable stay-at-home alternative. If SR Labs could provide even a high percentage of the revenues Jackson believed it would, it could be an important way for exhibitors to diversify its revenue stream from one limited to customers coming to theaters and spending on concessions. SR Labs principals, who didn't say much on the record as stories leaked out several years ago, issued a series of statements today as the principals pressed their case anew to be part of the theatrical ecosystem and help create extra revenue source for both sides when theaters reopen and the economics of moviegoing in a brave new world take shape. The venture would itself get a portion of the revenue from each sale. Said SR Labs investor Sean Parker, in the face of the SARS-CoV pandemic, our world has been upended by an invisible enemy sparing no country or industry. The damage has been especially acute amongst film studios and theatrical exhibitors. Since my earliest memories as a child, my hopes, values, and aspirations were shaped by the power of film and the immersive nature of the theatrical experience. We must do everything in our power to preserve the time-honored tradition of theatrical exhibition at this pivotal moment in our history. A pivotal moment when its very existence is under threat. We've endured many tumultuous moments in our history. This too will pass. But in the face of existential threats, it is only by summoning our greatest abilities, our collective creativity, and innovative capacities that we have not only survived, but prospered. We need to work together. We do. To preserve the cinematic experience, not only for writers and filmmakers, but also for the movie-going public and for the benefit of future generations who have yet to experience the magic of cinema themselves. We at SR Labs are committed to achieving one goal, providing both studios and exhibitors the tools and technologies they need to future-proof and expand their business. I could not be more excited to work with Manjit and the leadership team in realizing this goal. So it's SR Labs CEO Manjit Singh said, the traditional film business is undergoing a seismic shift driven by a combination of new content providers and changing consumer expectations. I'm excited to join the team at SR Labs at such a pivotal moment. Working together with Prem and the incredible team he and Sean have assembled, I believe we can leverage our unique technology to drive meaningful value for both film studios as well as theatrical exhibitors. Let the discussion begin anew. Now, people have often said to me when it comes to things like Star Trek, Rob, you're just stuck in the past. You just want it to be like it was in the past. And I'm like, I don't understand that at all, considering throughout my entire life I've been getting new Star Trek moving forward. I'm a futurist. I believe that humanity is much better off as we move forward into the future. Of course, I'm always talking about Yuval Harari's book *Sapiens*, which talks about how after detailing 100 years or 100,000 years of Homo sapien history, that we are better off than we've ever been. I believe that. I believe it is our destiny to become a technologically advanced species that will one day conquer the stars after we conquer our own shortcomings. I'm a firm believer in all of that. But in order to be that way, you have to understand that disruptive technology is the name of the game moving forward. And if you're not ready for sometimes unforeseen seismic shifts in technology, I mean, as someone like myself, look, as a movie fan, I have watched over the last, I've been collecting physical media now. This is the 40th year I've collected physical media, that I've owned movies. And I first was encountering that. Jimmy Fiddler, my friend Jimmy Fiddler, 5th and 6th grade, Jimmy Fiddler's dad, they're a pretty wealthy family. Jimmy Fiddler his dad had a VCR and was able to acquire a bootleg video cassette of Star Wars. This is before I had my own VCR, and it was pretty crazy. And it was amazing. And I watched home video technology begin. I started working at a home video store when I was 13. There were no videos. There were still these very, very expensive boutique-y things that serviced wealthy people. When I started, it was one of the first video stores in the country I worked at. It was in Seattle, called Video Space. I've often said it was founded by Weston Nishimura, who later went on to become the founder of the VSDA, the Video Software Dealers Association of America, that became hugely important in the 80s and the 90s in terms of dealing with studios and things like that. So watching the motion picture business evolve has been something interesting. By 1985, I had completely divested from videotape. I was no longer interested because I had moved on to Laserdiscs. I no longer collected movies on tape because I hated videotape. It was garbage. I hated, not that Laserdiscs were necessarily that much better, but they were substantially better than videotape. And what I hated was I had a huge collection of movies on tape, and every time I watched them, there was more dropouts. I was pissed. I mean, yeah, I like recording movies and things, but I was always about quality. How can I get the best experience? And the dream was always to be able to buy equipment and recreate as close as possible the theatrical experience at home. Well, depending on how much money you have, you can. I have friends that actually have movie theater projectors in their homes. Actual movie theater projectors. The same projectors that they use in movie theaters. Of course, they're $500,000, and you need the kind of room, you need enough throw and a big enough screen, but I have friends that do, and it's amazing. And IMAX is starting to move into the home, and there's all kinds of craziness happening, and I'm like, bring it on. However, as good as that equipment's going to be, as much as I've collected movies throughout my life, I've never stopped, not once, ever wanting to go to a movie theater. I've always had favorite movie theaters where I've lived here in LA. Back in Seattle, most of my favorite movie theaters don't exist anymore, but I've watched the exhibition business change in my own life. I mean, I grew up, when I was a kid, there was big, grand movie houses still, and they would survive. They could open up a movie, and these big movie theaters would survive because the movies would, like Star Wars, played at the UA 150 in Seattle for over a year. And that theater was where everybody in the city went to see Star Wars. It was not opened on a bunch of screens all over the city where people could go see. You had to go to the big movie theaters to see these films. Obviously, in my lifetime, I watched that change. The rise of the multiplex and all of that. Now, what we're seeing with AMC, unfortunately, what AMC started to do is what they did back in the 50s when television, the advent of television, changed movie-going, in that we got widescreen films. We no longer had the Academy ratio. Movies used to be basically square, like on TV used to be. And then with the advent of television, Hollywood figured out ways to make much wider movies. You had different widescreen formats, whether it was things like VistaVision or Super Panavision or Super Panavision 70, Technoscope, Tohoscope. There was all different kinds of widescreen, wide gauge filmmaking that was happening to make movies even bigger and more immersive. And it worked. It worked. I mean, seeing those films beginning in the 50s, grand experience. I mean, if you want to go see a biblical epic like The Robe, it was widescreen. If you want to go see a Hitchcock movie, he was shooting in VistaVision. I mean, it was a big deal. Well, now with the technology, people have, even your basic TV that you might go pick up at Best Buy, you can get a widescreen 4K TV that looks pretty damn good. Really interesting stuff. So, I think now what's happening is we now live in a world where people can stream what they want. Everything you want at the click of you can get whatever. Whether you want to watch something on Netflix, whether you want something that's video on demand, you can get it all. And this is a new paradigm. And it was very interesting that this, I didn't know much about. I'd heard about a screening room. I'd read about it. I remember when that was happening, and it really went nowhere. But now that they're redoing it, what happened back then is people just, if they don't know what it is, people are slow to respond. But now showing that things like the Trolls World Tour, sure, it's not going to make what it would have made theatrically. But that's because it's the beginning of a new paradigm. It's a beginning of something people are going to get used to. And if this company, look, I don't know about buying or acquiring a device for $150. I see that as sort of a drawback. I can understand why such a device needs to be used, because one of the great things, once you stream something on a computer, I've got software, I can capture anything that's playing on my computer right now. Hell, I am speaking to you through software that is capturing from my computer or capturing from my desktop, whatever's there, whether it's pictures, sound, video, whatever. I can do that right now. I can stream it to you. What's to stop me from using this kind of software and stream a movie that I've paid for to 20 of my friends? Give somebody a link, you can come on and hook up, and I can show you a movie. I mean, all of these have to be taken into consideration. And it's a whole different paradigm. But what I do see is that as more and more people have the convenience of getting something at home, I think the idea of movie going the way we currently know it, the way we've known it for the past 100 years, is in fact imperiled to a certain extent. And I don't necessarily know how movie theaters are going to combat that. Do I still want to be able to go to AMC's Dolby Cinemas? Yes. Dolby Cinemas are amazing. I really love AMC's Dolby Cinema experience. The last time I went was with John, and Elizabeth and I went and saw Joker at the Dolby Cinema in the Burbank Town Square. And it was great. With great presentation. They've got great food, great seats, very comfortable experience. And I would not want that replaced, because thunderous sound, razor sharp picture, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I want as a moviegoer. But if things change, I'm not going to lie. If I don't even get to see all the first run movies that I want to see. It's just sometimes inconvenient to do so. And as much as I like the movie-going experience, I do not want to see that experience go away. I don't. But with these new technologies rising up and disruptions happening like this, one never knows. I mean, things change. We evolve. And I think it's got to be something that's we'll see. I mean, I see this global pandemic was something that was an inevitability. Eventually, something like this was going to happen, and quite frankly, uh, um, over 20 million Americans, or 20,000 Americans have lost their lives because of this pandemic. Also, people lost their lives yesterday in catastrophic weather conditions here in the United States. The next pandemic could be far worse. Like in Steven Soderbergh's Contagion, MERS, I think it was called MERS, in the movie, had a 25 to 30% fatality rate. So it was much higher, much more apocalyptic, but it was done very. If you haven't seen Contagion, it's probably the most topical movie you'll ever watch, and it's done with a dispassionate, clinical look at what can really happen, and because of those things, these new technologies are always going to be available, and we'll see what happens. I don't want to see movie theaters go away. I don't want to see them go away. I really don't. But it's a tough one. It is a tough one when we're in a situation like this. I would love to, I'll tell you flat out. I would have paid $50 or maybe even $100 to watch No Time to Die, just because I'm a big Bond fan. Is that steep? Is that expensive? Yeah. But if a family of four wants to go, if I want to go to the ArcLight, 4 tickets at the ArcLight for an opening night movie like that, it's $80. It's $80 going to a premium theater. Now, I would like to see Die Another Day at the Cinerama Dome or in the Hollywood, the TCL Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard with that IMAX laser projection screen. But you're still looking at $80. That's how much it is. And while, you can have a home theater system that's great, it's not going to rival going to an IMAX house. But anyway, a lot of stuff happening. A lot of things happening in all different directions. I want to see the movie theater experience preserved. That's just me. But then again, I could be that old man on his lawn shouting at the sky. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I'm a purist when it comes to cinema. It's all very, very interesting. I want to remind everybody, speaking of this kind of thing, that I will be is it 2 weeks, 10 days? I think it's 2 weeks. I will be participating in the Mainframe Comic-Con. People are like, well, this picture of me, this picture of me is like 8 years old. So, sorry. I mean, I thought it's a good picture of me. Whatever. Yeah, it's 8 years old. I'll make sure the next time they use a newer picture of me. But it's an online Comic-Con. It's going to be interesting. I'll be moderating a few panels. I don't quite know how it's going to work, but I figured, heck, count me in. I'm willing to evolve with the times. So check that out. Mainframe. It's live and online. All right. I think it's pretty cool, actually. If they asked me to do it, why wouldn't I do it? Good on them. So look out for that. I don't know how it's all going to work. We'll see. We'll see. Now let's see. I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday. I thought it was Easter. I'd take a day off. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter, or you had a good Passover, or whatever it is you celebrate. Or if you don't celebrate, I hope you had a good weekend day. Not only did I not do a show, I was doing work all day. I just got a few more things I have to deliver for the very packed to the gills Hills Run Red Blu-ray that comes out on June 16, although I don't know about replication. It might have to get pushed, but it's tentatively slated for release on June 16th. And I'll tell you, if you ever wanted to see or hear how a low-budget indie horror film is produced, this disc will tell you everything you need to know, because it is packed. Packed. Anyway, let's see what you guys have to say today. What's going on in your minds? Let's go back. Wow, okay. So Calvin Bose sent in a tip yesterday. Probably didn't realize that wasn't going on. Calvin says, the questions, what do Tribbles have against Klingons? And I don't understand why the Enterprise crew are laughing, because I don't think it would be funny for the Tribbles after they're found in the Klingon engine room. What do you think happened to them? Well, Calvin, of course, you are referring to the end of the second season Star Trek, the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. Scotty beamed the entire kit and caboodle, all of the thousands of Tribbles that were on the Enterprise, into the engine room of the Klingon Captain Koloth's, I would assume, Klingon battlecruiser. I mean, in the new version, they showed that it was, I think, a D7. But in the old version, you didn't really see that it was a D7 because they hadn't made the model yet, and it hadn't appeared. but let's just call it a D7. And you're asking a very important question. Unfortunately, I think those poor Tribbles probably found themselves all spaced. I don't think the Klingons would have taken very kindly to looking at a screeching horde of Tribbles in their engine room. They either probably massacred them or just transported them all into space, which is unfortunate, and I don't necessarily blame the Klingons for doing that. Tribbles didn't like Klingons, and after all, they were an ecological menace. Never forget. I guess never forget the great Klingon, the Tribble massacre of whatever stardate. I don't remember the stardates, but whatever the stardate was on that episode, that was a day that will certainly live in Tribble infamy, I suppose. Paul Gilmore sends in a tip and says, Rob, I have a home theater question. I'm not sure if you can answer or not, but I tried to connect an optical cable to my 5.1 receiver. However, it's only producing Dolby Pro Logic, not Dolby Digital or DTS 5.1. Any ideas? Thanks, bud. Well, Paul, the first thing that would come to mind is either an output thing where you're connecting, so you try to connect an optical cable to your 5.1 receiver. I don't know what your optical cable is coming out of. I'm just going to assume you're saying it's a Blu-ray player. It could be a PlayStation. You might want to check your output commands on whatever system. If it's a Blu-ray player or it's a PlayStation or something, you might want to go into the settings and make sure that it's outputting those signals. On the input on your receiver, you might need to have it set to auto. So it might now only be getting or only recognizing Dolby Pro Logic. You have to set it up on your receiver too, that it recognizes all Dolby or all optical, whatever's coming in. It'll default to that. It'll recognize that. My Pioneer Elite amplifier does that. Through the optical cable, it knows what signal it's getting. You have to set it up that way. Those are the first things. I have no idea what you've got, so it'd be hard to say. But anyway, that would be my first. That would be where I looked first. Joseph is here. Arakovich. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Joseph? I'm always scared to pronounce it. Arakovich? Sends in a tip and says, bruh, never seen Stargate SG-1. Never seen Stargate Atlantis with our boy Jason Momoa. Yes, Momoa was on Atlantis before he was king of Atlantis. Rob, both of these Stargate shows are up your alley. I guarantee it. Yeah, I keep hearing that. You know, it's just I just got to get into it. I got to just jump in and just bite that bullet. I know. But right now, all I can think about is the 8th episode of Devs. I don't think I've wanted to see an episode of science fiction TV more than I've wanted to see the 8th episode of Devs. I have a theory about what happens. I will not share it with you, but I told you episode 7 kind of put me in an existential crisis, to be honest. Boy, did I love that. I thought it was great. For a show that, yes, it's got sort of international intrigue in it. Really, it's got a lot of intellectual intrigue, and episode 7 took it to a new level. I was like, wow, how fascinating. I really hope it sticks the landing. I really liked Annihilation up to the landing. I didn't feel it stuck, but I get it. Please, Alex Garland, I'm crossing my fingers. Please do right by everybody. Willow sends in a tip and she says, does the continuity, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I have a Willow Yang letter to read later. Yes. And it's a doozy. It is a doozy. Whenever Willow writes letters, I get excited, but this one in particular made blood flow to my, those places where you want your blood to flow to. I'm telling you. Thanks for that, Willow. You know what I'm saying? I know that Vesna does. Willow says, does the continuity or lack thereof in the Fox X-Men movies bother you? We got numerous duplicates. Emma Frost, Angel, Sabretooth, Trask. The ages of the characters make no sense. A lot of the events contradict. I used to. It used to bother me. But then I just let it go. After X-Men and X-Men 2, and it spun off into oblivion, it has a loose continuity. I mean, I've always thought that, this idea of the Marvel, there was no Marvel Cinematic Universe when the X-Men movies first happened. And I think I looked at the X-Men movies the way I looked at James Bond movies. There was sort of a very loose continuity in the movies, or no continuity at all, really. There was some elements that were the same. That's why Judi Dench could play M in both the Pierce Brosnan movies and the Daniel Craig movies. That never bothered me. And I looked at the X-Men movies like that they would share similarities, but they certainly weren't necessarily part of a cinematic universe, because a lot of it, like you said, X-Men First Class, X-Men Apocalypse, and X-Men Dark Phoenix, not a lot of continuity there. Days of Future Past, it's all very fast and loose. So it really never bothered me. It should, but a lot of the events, absolutely, like you say, they do contradict. So I look at the X-Men films kind of as their own thing. I don't look at them. They were not set up. The idea of a cinematic universe like that, continuity, they should have had continuity, but they didn't really. I think if Bryan Singer had directed X-Men 3, X-Men The Last Stand, they might have had more continuity, but it was very sort of fast and loose. But you know what? I really like X-Men 1 and 2. I like X-Men Days of Future Past. I like Apocalypse seemingly more than most people. I think the first half of Apocalypse is really, really good. I really like it. And yeah, I mean, I like the X-Men movies. And Dark Phoenix, while a disappointment, is certainly watchable. It's not the horrible train wreck. It's not like it's not like it's the Catwoman of the X-Men franchise, although some people might say it is. It's not that bad, but that's kind of how I feel about that. Dieter Shiny Bastian from Deutschland is here. Greetings, Rob. Really liked your comment on the John Campea show that just because you got money, you can't buy a movie theater chain. When John Campea said like 50 times over and over again, Amazon should just buy AMC, my eyes were rolling into the back of my head. Well, yeah, I mean, look, Amazon's got a ton of money. You can have a lot of money, but having a lot of money doesn't mean you're still going to be able to, like, look, if I suddenly won $500 million in the lottery, I would not pull a Matt Damon and go buy a zoo. What do I know about buying zoos? You could buy one, you could own it. If I wanted to go to the zoo, I could employ people to work there. But I mean, buying a movie theater chain is enormous. You're buying a whole industry. You're buying a service industry that's I mean, just because somebody has money, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that they just buy a movie theater chain. You'd need to if somebody buys the movie theater chain, let's hope they have a plan. Let's hope they can jump right in with both feet and make it all work. Especially in the entertainment space, the idea of getting into entertainment is look. If you were an insurance broker and you suddenly figured you could get into Hollywood, it'd be like, ooh, I'm going to feel some of that Hollywood glamour, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, there's an article today in the LA Times about the lack of sanitary conditions on movie sets, and like when you go on a movie set, they're using porta potties and things, especially if you're out on location. There's no toilet facilities like in the woods, so they'll bring out porta potties, and it's not like they come with janitorial services that clean up these things. I mean, in a way, maybe sometimes I've worked on shows where the PAs give the porta potties a wipe down at the end of the day. I've worked that way, but they're not exactly the most sanitary of conditions. Working in a studio is different. When I was working on Superman Returns, for instance, it was all shot for the most part at Fox Studios Sydney, which is a great facility that was kept very clean, that had cleaning crews, and they would come in every day. And so it's not. Where was I going with this? I don't know. I just read this article. So, and Brian Eng asked me about it on Twitter. But hey, where are you going? I don't know. But yes, you have to be able to run something properly. You can't just decide that you're going to, there's a whole, janitorial is one thing. How are you going to take over a whole business and make it work? I don't think you can. You have to be committed, and you have to know exactly what you're doing. Larry sends in a tip and says, are you still using Lucky Tiger men's grooming products? Which is for those men who want to look good and feel great. What's the story on that sponsorship? Oh, well, Larry, I'll tell you. First of all, yes, I am still using Lucky Tiger men's grooming products. I actually really like their products. I think their premium products are really great. And I love their facial scrub. I really like, since I have been playing with facial hair, I've been using their shaving cream, and I really like Lucky Tiger products. Their sponsorship was more of an experiment, and it only lasted for a year. I mean, that's really what they were they were committing to. I think the problem was, I mean, it was always going to end. The sponsorship was always going to end. I think though that, and I made, I don't know if anybody watched the Living the Lucky Tiger Life videos I was making, and I was doing stuff above and beyond what the sponsorship entailed. I like that product, but you can't make something work. I mean, my channel only reached so far, and what they were using my sponsorship for, and I wasn't just the only one. They were trying to build an online presence, an online going to their online store and buying product, and doing that. You have to commit to that. You can't just sponsor me and expect that to work. It has to be a big thing. I was hoping it would explode, and I think I definitely did my part. But I will say this: I am a huge fan of their product line, and I was very happy for them to sponsor the first year of this show. It really took a lot of pressure off me in terms of my daily life, to be honest. And I really love those guys, and I really, really like their product a lot. So yes, I still use their product, Lucky Tiger men's grooming products, for those men who want to look good and feel great. So even though they're no longer a sponsor of this channel, and I don't know how much they've put into their online presence, you can buy their products at other retailers, and I wholeheartedly still, they get my highest endorsement, and I say that having not, after the first of the year, they're no longer sponsoring the channel anymore, and I knew that was coming. This was not something that was news to me, but I really do like their product. By the way, anybody who wants to can sponsor this channel. I'm happy if you want to. Murray Reich sends in a tip and says, why hasn't Tenet moved yet? It's mid-April and the movie comes out in July, and you need to do a marketing push soon. And even if theaters do open in mid-June, it's still not enough time to do marketing before release date. Do you think they will move very soon? Murray, that's a really good question. Murray is asking about Christopher Nolan's new film that they've already released an IMAX teaser for. And I think it was on the front of Joker? I think it was on the front of Joker. They did the same thing with The Dark Knight when they released that opening heist sequence in IMAX. Tenet is a huge, maybe Warner Brothers' biggest movie of the year. I think they're waiting to see. Everybody wants the economy to open. I don't think there's anybody on the planet Earth that doesn't want to go back to work, that doesn't want to make money. It's not like, we're not like Canada where people get, $800 a week for a while. We get our stimulus check. Maybe you'll get a second one that'll last about a week and then it goes away. I think everybody wants the country open, but we have to open the country smartly and safely. Otherwise, we're going to, COVID-19 will just flare up and come back, and then all of the social distancing. Look, for one, our social distancing order here in LA County is on until May 15th. And until then, there's no going out. I would love to go to my favorite Mexican restaurant, El Portal, here in Pasadena, and have their mole and enchiladas and margaritas. I mean, I love going to El Portal. I want to walk down to Lucky Baldwin's, where I always go, and I want to sit down there and I want to order the dogs. I take the dogs with me. I want to order them their chicken breasts and have their fish and chips and get myself a nice, really alcoholic IPA or something in a goblet and my Jameson rocks. I want to sit there and enjoy myself. I haven't done any of that in a long time. There's no one that wants to go out more than I do, but we have to do it safely. And I think they're clinging to the hope. I think mid-July, they're still 3 months out. We're not quite at April 15th yet. I think they're going to hang on and see how long it's going to take. Because even if they open everything up, I think movie theaters are going to be one of the last places people are going to flock to, because you're putting people all together in a big room. So we'll see. But I think they're going to make a decision. They just made a decision on something today. What was it that they pushed to? The Pixar movie Soul has now officially been moved into November. So we'll see. I don't know. James Bonner says, thank you for recommending The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, a very sweet story incorporating the very clever use of colors throughout the film. FYI, totally off topic, but check out a documentary about Ghostbusters fandom titled Ghost Heads. I'll do that. I didn't know there was that. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, if you don't know the movie that James is talking about, it's Jacques Demy, Demy's early 60s film. It's entirely sung. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. It is one of the great tragic romances of the cinema. It's also one of the most beautiful films you'll ever see, and the way that color is used, it's amazing. It's amazing. But yeah, Jane 1138. I like that. Jane 1138. She's not THX 1138, but she's Jane 1138. Sends in a tip and she says, sending a shout out for having David Gerald's Rage for Revenge on your shelf. Love that series, but nobody remembers it these days. P.S. Since it's on Amazon Prime, how about a live Free Enterprise quarantine commentary or watch along? Well, Jane, you know what? I'm going to do that. I would love to go in. I've talked a lot. First of all, first things first. David Gerald's War Against the Tor series, which now it encompasses 4 books. It's supposed to have 7 books. He's been writing the 5th book for like 25 years, but hasn't got to it. I mean, I know David. I'm friends with David. I love David. His War Against the Tor series is one of my favorite series of books of all time. Yes, and this is the 3rd book. Oh, here it is. It's funny. I have lots of fun changing up what paperback books on the shelf, but I haven't done it in a while. Okay, here's the 3rd book, A Rage for Revenge. There's A Matter for Men, A Day for Damnation, A Rage for Revenge, and why am I drawing a blank? I want to say A Method for Madness, but I think A Method for Madness is the 5th book that hasn't come out yet. This series of books is it started out in the early 80s. Starlog was pimping it when Gerald was writing for Starlog. I love this series of books. For those of you who are looking for something to read, it's frustrating, though, because there's only 4 books, and it's sort of left on a cliffhanger that's now been going on for 25 years. But the premise of the series, and by the way, it would make an awesome television show. And it's been apparently optioned over the years, and that was one of the things. If Axanar had panned out and we finished it and we still had the studio, I really wanted to do the TV series version of War Against Tor. And the premise of this book, for those of you who don't know it, this series of books, it is about an invasion of the Earth by an alien ecosystem. Starting at the submicroscopic level, it actually begins with a plague that wipes out a lot of people. But then our entire biosphere has been invaded, and they don't know why or how this has happened. But the biosphere is millions of years more advanced and has been around than ours. They don't know if it came on a meteor. They don't know how it got here. Maybe it was deposited here, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of an intelligence behind the outbreak so that we know of. But this ecosystem is much more advanced than ours, and it literally begins consuming our ecosystem from the equatorial level onward. And it began with obviously microbiological forms, and then it goes all the way up to there's all new plant and animal life, very scary alien animal life, including giant orange caterpillars that are they're man-eating. And what's so fascinating about the book is it's all about humanity's response to this and what we're doing to combat it. And it seems like there's not a whole hell of a lot we can do. We're getting pushed off of our planet, and it follows this character, Jim, and he has very fluid sexuality. But there's so many interesting concepts in this book and about how the Toran ecosystem works. I've read this series of books. I've read the 4 books 5 times. Every time I pick it up, A Day for Damnation, I open the first chapter. I can't get enough. So it's absolutely one of my favorite things in the world, and I wish he would finish it. But then maybe he shouldn't. I don't know if the end would be as good as it could possibly be, but I can't recommend this series of books highly enough. It's so good. So Jane, thanks for that. And also, as people know, I would love to do what I call the final frontier cut of Free Enterprise if I could get access. The problem is that you need a couple of $100,000 really to retransfer a film properly in 4K, and I'd like to really go back and re-edit the movie, not very much, but subtly fix it, kind of the way Oliver Stone did Alexander or whatever. But I did do a preliminary version of Free Enterprise, a preliminary recut of, I need to get into the negative and get stuff that I don't have. But I took the long version and I made a widescreen version of it. I wanted to change the aspect ratio to go from 185 to 235, which I've done. So maybe I'll have a viewing party and ask Mark Altman to come along and we could do a live viewing party for that. I think that'd be kind of fun. The Great One sends in a tip and says, longtime lurker, I agree with Stubble. Wheel of Time is great, and you should read it. It shows in a convincing way a man being told that he's fated to save the world and destroy it in the process. It's massive in scope as a whole world is prepping for Armageddon. Wow, that's cool. I definitely should read that, and I want to, because Stubble loves it. When somebody loves something that much, it has to be good. Now, this is not the time. I'm not going to cut to Stubble's video once again, but I could if I wanted to, because I have it queued up. Mark Evans sends in a tip and says, we may be entering a new era. The movie experience might never be the same again. Being OCD, I struggled with going as much as I loved going. I don't touch anything and sanitized what I had to. Those communal 3D glasses freaked me out. Then it might have been mostly in my head, but this has changed everything. Now it's more than OCD germaphobe. It won't be me alone freaking out at going to that kind of environment. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. Well, Mark, first of all, yeah, I mean, if you're OCD, it's kind of rough. So yeah, I don't know, man. I really don't know. I don't know if people are going to be eager to do these things. I hope they are. I mean, look, eventually we will get a vaccine and we will take care of this. I mean, if you go back and you think, look at polio, for instance, look what we've done with that. And I believe in technology. I believe in science. And I think vaccinations, for the most part, have worked, as evidenced in my own life. But we'll see. I think it will all get back to normal. I don't know what that means if you're OCD. How that could work. I mean, I can't even imagine if you're OCD and you're a germaphobe and you go into a movie theater. But I guess if you bring your own Purell and stuff, I mean, people are just sitting down watching movies. I don't know. I mean, I go to the ArcLight Theater here in LA. It's pretty upscale. It's a premium theater, and people are there. They're pretty pretty respectful, and the staff does a good job of keeping the theaters clean. But I feel your pain. Mark C. sent in a super chat and says, without discussing the subject matter, did you happen to see the video I DM'd you? I started watching it. I will say this. I don't know that I buy it, but I have more to say about it later. I just dipped in, though, but I will get back to you on that later. Sadhu's Screening Room. Sadhu's Screening Room says, Dune promo looks great since the movie's only the first half. Where do you think they'll end it? Also, Westworld Season 3 is great as well, giving me massive Rick and Morty plus V for Vendetta vibes. Only 8 episodes this season, so let's see where they take it. Yeah, you know, I haven't caught up with Westworld yet. I'm going to. I mean, I liked Westworld Season 2, not as much as Season 1, but I liked it. For those of you who don't know, Vanity Fair released a picture of Paul Atreides on a beach on Caladan with, it kind of looked like Harvester carryalls from David Lynch's Dune were flying in the background, sort of. I mean, I'm sure it's not that, but yeah, they release a piece on it. I can't wait to see Dune. I can tell you where it ends, but maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I did review the script, although that episode I had to pull it down because Warner Brothers gave me a copyright strike, but I love the script for Dune. I loved it. I can't wait to see the movie. I really hope people go because, as you just said, they've only made the first half of the book, and if it doesn't do well, that'll be the end of that, which is really too bad. I mean, I understand movies are expensive, but why not amortize the cost and shoot the whole book? I don't know. I mean, I do. So, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Stubble McShave says, today is exactly 50 years ago since the words, Houston, we have a problem was uttered on Apollo 13. That's crazy. 50 years ago today. I did not know that. That's amazing. An amazing, by the way, one of the most amazing feats of engineering in human history. The fact that, first of all, you had the command module and the LEM to deal with, but then also that they were able to fix that. I mean, they figured out how to rescue that crew. I mean, if ever you wanted to, the best example of what science and engineering can do, the Apollo 13 mishap is one of the greatest examples of that. And by the way, that's a really good movie. Really good movie. I really like Apollo 13 a great deal. Dan V sends in a tip and says, I know there are Ethan Van Sciver fans in this group, but he decided to again claim today that Darwin Cook was Comicsgate, who died 4 years ago. His followers then mass reported his wife for denying it, and he refuses to respond to her, which is cowardly and disgraceful. Yeah, look, I don't know Ethan Van Sciver. I've admired his artwork. You know, I've watched some of his stuff online, but Darwin Cook was Comicsgate. I can't, you know, just judging from his artwork, who knows? I mean, I got Darwin Cook's work right here on the shelf. I don't know what that means. Why would anybody mass report his wife? This is my problem. You know, the man's wife, she's a widow. I mean, give it a rest. Is it that important? I don't know. I think it is cowardly and disgraceful. That's not good. Mike Crouch sends in a tip and says, I have an itch. An itch I cannot scratch? Is it an itch you can or cannot scratch, Mike? Who knows? Dan goes on and says, it honestly makes me angry because Ethan Van Sciver keeps making wrong accusations about a dead man and ignores his wife. He took a video out of context, and Darwin, with that video, clarified it years ago, where it's disrespectful to do that with pushing that position. Yeah, I don't understand half the things that go on like this in our civilization. I really don't. I don't get why people want to cling to various falsehoods. They want to believe in things that aren't true to push a certain agenda. I mean, I guess because I live my own life as a fan of mankind and a fan of people. And it to me, it does nobody any good. Like, look, I hate Hitler. I hate Nazis. They exterminated people en masse. They were really good at it. I don't like Pol Pot. I didn't like the Khmer Rouge either. I mean, these are people that were bad. And I just don't understand what the point is for rallying followers to go after a widow of a very esteemed comic book creator. For what reason? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm like, why not spend more time making more comics or creating something? That's the thing that I find frustrating. So I feel your pain, Dan. Although I don't know. I haven't seen the video, so I can't speak to it directly. Jerome Morgan, excuse me. I was coughing. I don't know why I'm coughing all of a sudden. I've been socially distanced for a long time, so I'm good. Jerome Morgan says, I have no doubt that AMC as well as other theaters will bounce back, but at what cost? How much will be passed on to us? Could we be looking at higher ticket prices? You know what? If we were looking, if I feel comfortable that we can all go back to the movie theaters, I think it would all be understood that they're going to have to charge an extra $2. Or maybe the studios will come to some agreement and allow them to take an extra $2. Or somebody will. I mean, somebody's got to do something. As I spit, somebody's got to do something. But I don't, look, man, if I can go to a Dolby Cinema, an AMC Dolby Cinema, and I have to pay an extra $2 for the next year, understanding I am helping Dolby Cinemas or AMC Cinemas get out from under a horrible debt they incurred, not by any mishandling of their own, I would do it. If I can see Top Gun, and if I can see Tenet, and if I can see No Time to Die, and if I can see Soul, and if I could see Wonder Woman, if I could see all those things, I'll pay the extra $2. You know, I understand, as long as, of course, we're all working. So yeah, I hope so. But I think you're right, Jerome. I think they're going to bounce back, and I don't have a problem. I mean, look at John Campia's show. Even John Campia's audience, incredibly generous when he decided to raise money for charity. John decided to raise money for charity. I went on his show. He's not paying me. He wasn't paying me that day. It was a charity thing. And I think when people understand that, look, we're going to have to help each other out for a while, I think it's good. I think we are going to look at higher ticket prices. But you know what? If it's only $1 or $2, I don't have a problem. It's $5, maybe it's going to get a little tough, but you never know. Mark Evans sends in a tip and says, while I agree that to get the experience the director wants you to have, a theater is best, on the other hand, I sometimes find that hard to do in a crowded theater. Talking or audible reactions from the crowd is distracting to me. Me too. So I took the time to set up a decent home theater and took a lot of time to fine-tune the 7.1 to have a great sound experience with no distractions, as close to the director wanted. Don't underestimate the power of proper sound. Just need to go 4K now. Hey, Mark, I've been a huge fan of home theater for a long time. And what's incredible to me, for those people who don't ever take advantage of the fact that if you've got physical media, or even if you're streaming and you're getting something with Dolby Atmos, it's unbelievable how much a decent sound system can accentuate the experience watching films. People don't know. But when they do it, and I don't mean, like, you can go get little, I will say this, getting little speakers doesn't do it. You really have to get a big sound system. You really have to get something with punch, rattle your cage. So yeah, I'm glad you have a home theater system. By the way, send a picture of your setup. Put it up in the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery on the website. Simon sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, I sent you a letter a few weeks ago about my love for film scores from when I was a kid today and the evolution of fandom. I know you've read a ton of letters at your fingers, but curious if you got it and will you read it? Didn't I read it? I read a thing about film scores and talked about them. I'm not sure, but I'll get around to it. Maybe I didn't see it, but I remember over the last couple weeks, I have been reading some letters about film scores. But I'll look into that. Garen Gillum says, ooh, I bought Arrow's release of Cruising, my first time watching it. Much better than I thought it would be. I had no idea it was based on real events. Pacino's character was based on a real cop that actually had a part in the film. The transfer looks great. For those of you who don't know what Garen's talking about, William Friedkin's, I want to say 1980, thriller Cruising, which is, as Garen said, based on a real experience, was about a cop played by Al Pacino that goes into the rough trade gay underworld, the leather daddy bear underworld, and looking for a killer. Somebody is preying on gay men in that environment, and Al Pacino plays the cop based on a real guy who goes undercover, and what happens. It's very funny because a friend of my dad's produced that movie, Jerry Weintraub, and he took me to see it when it first came out. And yes, from the director of The Exorcist, Bobby, you're really going to like this. I was like 14, probably 13 when it came out. And because, his client produced it, we went. Now, I thought it was fascinating. I didn't know much about the leather gay underworld or it's not an underworld. It's just a scene. I didn't know much about leather daddies or bears or anything like that. My dad was like, to his credit, though, we didn't leave. Because he loves crime thrillers. And I was like, wow, that's, this movie was hardcore. I've always liked it. And I'll tell you something interesting that I learned when I was at USC Film School. This is a true story. But, in every time you see a murder in Cruising, and by the way, Garen, since you got this disc, go back and step through it and you'll see. Every time there's a murder, it's intercut with a close-up of hardcore anal intercourse. It's true. Stabbings. I didn't believe it when William Friedkin himself told us this at USC. I'm like, come on. He told the story about how he showed the film backwards, these sex scenes backwards and forwards to the ratings board when he did it, and it passed. They didn't say anything wrong, but it's definitely in the finished film because I went and got the tape right away and was like, uh-oh, look at that. So it's a pretty interesting film, and that transfer is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. I love that transfer. It's a great disc, by the way. Paul Gilmore sends in a tip and says, NBC Universal Streaming Service, and I'm not calling it by that stupid name, Peacock. He didn't say Peacock. He just said stupid name. Launches Wednesday. Have you heard it's worth springing for? Paul, I did not know that was the case. I had no idea Peacock launches Wednesday. Wow. I haven't seen a whole lot for it. I know Quibi is saying they've got like 1.3 million subscribers, and I'm like, wow, I just found out that you can get it for free if you're a T-Mobile customer. So I'm going to go watch some Quibi and see what I think, and I'll get back to you on it. So I did not know that Universal's launching Peacock this week. How crazy that is. Wacky. Justin Toner says, Rob, as if I needed another reason to love the Criterion Collection, they just announced today that in July they will release a Bruce Lee Blu-ray set, all 5 of his movies, including Enter the Dragon, in 4K and 2K digital restorations. Already pre-ordered it. Well, son, Justin, I'm going to get on that right away. I didn't know they're going to do that. Just like their Godzilla box set. I love that. I love that. That's crazy. That's amazing. What else did they release? Actually, why am I asking you when I can just go and go Criterion July? You've brought me the message I needed to see, and you just brought it to me. And let's see, Criterion channels, titles just announced. Wait, that's April. Bruce Lee Criterion Select. Ooh. Wow, okay. 4K digital restorations of The Big Boss, Fists of Fury, Game of Death, and Way of the Dragon with uncompressed original monorail soundtracks. 2K digital restoration of the rarely seen 99-minute 1973 theatrical version of Enter the Dragon. Wow. Restoration of the 102-minute special edition version of Enter the Dragon. Alternate audio soundtracks. 6 commentaries. Wow, dude. What a dope-ass box, and it comes in a rad... Ooh, look at this cover. Wait, I got to get this cover and show it to you guys because it's totally rad. Here, look at this. Oh man, Criterion's killing it with these releases. Here, let's see. I'll put this up on so you can see it. Let me go grab this so you can see this Bruce Lee cover because it's. I love these stylized. Some people are like, I don't like that, but I love these kinds of stylized covers. Here, let me show it to you. Let me go grab it. Here it is. Put it up. Ooh, here it is. Ready? Check it out. There's the cover. Yeah, look at that. I am so into that. Oh, yeah. Who doesn't want that? I want that. But it doesn't say what else is coming out July. Hang on. Let's see. Criterion July 2020. Like I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth. Available July 24. Oh, here it is. So, let's see. Oh, Come and See is coming. Ooh, Come and See is coming out, which I think I already knew. Oh, okay, July 14th. That's all they're saying. That's the only one. Of course, Criterion's got Come and See coming out June 30th, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire on the 23rd, which is pretty dope. And they're doing a good job. So there you go. But that's the only thing they're announcing for July 2020. Wow, that's pretty exciting. Gotta love that Criterion collection, man. You gotta love that Criterion collection. Fred Durant just sent in a super chat. Well, Fred, thank you very much for that. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, I loved A Quiet Place, but I don't buy that anything that can be killed by a shotgun can overrun the earth. I need more verisimilitude. Yeah, A Quiet Place, not a lot. Look, my whole question is how they get to Earth in the first place. Like, I know, like on a meteor, come on, man. Those creatures, they just descended from the sky. I need to know why. You got to give me more than that. But you know what? I understand. Sometimes, but you're right. A shotgun, those things are fast, though. They are fast. But yeah, where's that military tank? I just drive around in tanks. Paul Gilmore says, with AMC in trouble, do you think when they reopen they'll be able to afford to keep the A-list membership? Is that one reason why they are in debt? I don't think so. I think that they've been renovating their theaters. They've been upgrading. They've been spending money. Remember that movie theaters make a lot of their money by concessions, and by getting you in there to see more movies, you're spending more money there. At least that's the case. So I don't know. I don't think that's why they're in debt. I think that's actually got more people to go to the theater more often. But I thought it was mostly because of all the renovations and things that they're doing. But we'll see, because they were in debt, like $5 billion in debt, which is another big problem. Claudius is here. Bonjour, Rob. This is another question about The Living Daylights. Stuckman says it's one of his favorite Bond films. What do you think about Timothy Dalton's Dark Bond? For those of you who have not been paying attention or don't know who Chris Stuckman is a YouTuber, and he's been doing YouTube reviews for a long time. During this quarantine period, there hasn't been, or shelter-at-home period, there hasn't been new movies, so he's gone back and he's been doing these pretty great reviews of the James Bond movies. I just watched his License to Kill review about Dalton, and he likes Dalton. And I was a huge fan of The Living Daylights. I think The Living Daylights is definitely a top-tier Bond film. I loved it when it first came out. I still love it. I really like all of the storyline, the actors in it. It's got great action. It's got a great John Barry score. It was the last John Barry score for a James Bond movie, which is a bummer. But I really liked Dalton in The Living Daylights. I really did. I thought it was good. Not as big a fan of License to Kill, although Stuckman was. He liked License to Kill a lot. I think the problem with License to Kill is that it was done on the cheap. You know, most of it was shot in Mexico, and I think it kind of looks it. And I think it's too much like a Miami Vice episode. Once again, I think Bond was trying to following a trend rather than setting a trend. And it gets a little goofy at the end, but there's stuff in it to like. I really like Dalton's take on the character. He was dark and brooding, and he was very much an assassin, a rough and tumble assassin, but he still had compassion. And I really like Timothy Dalton as Bond. I'm sorry. I mean, basically, you know, Dalton got derailed. There was a Bond every 2 years, sometimes 3, but mostly every 2 years since 1962, up until License to Kill, which came out in the summer of 1989. And then there was a 6-year break because of the legal battle over Bond that Kevin McClory had been fighting with Cubby Broccoli for years and years and years. As a matter of fact, it's detailed in the book that's right up there, The Battle for Bond. That's very hard to find. But it is a great... look, you know what? Is it great? No. License to Kill I just didn't really like. You know, the John Gardner books, the Ian Fleming books, were taken over by John Gardner, and he wrote I think the first book that he wrote was License Revoked, and they were going to originally call the movie License Revoked, and then they're like, but people don't know what revoked means, so they called it License to Kill. License to Kill I think is it's kind of in a way needlessly gratuitous, but it really, I mean, it's a combination of Scarface and Miami Vice, really, but I love Dalton as Bond. I really also don't like Michael Kamen's score very much. And I loved Bond scores, but I didn't love that score. So, Mark C. sends in a super chat and says, the Darwin Cook thing is a fallacy. Ethan Van Sciver simply claimed that Darwin would have been sympathetic to the ideals of Comicsgate. Do not turn comics into political propaganda and treat your consumers with respect. I read the tweet. Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's very odd to me that so many of the things that I love, you know, whether you want to say get woke, go broke, or all that, I found the agenda-based storytelling to be strange to me, because all of the things that they've wanted, like you talk about, well, we have to have more inclusion. Like you go back and you look at Deep Space Nine. Well, there was a show that had lots of inclusion. They just weren't making it a point to. They were just doing it, and to me, that's how you get. I mean, Benjamin Sisko. You never really thought about the fact that Benjamin Sisko is first and foremost a black man. No, he was Ben Sisko, commander, and then he was captain, and he had a great relationship with his son. The fact that he was black was part of it. Yeah, they do Far Beyond the Stars, and they address it directly, but it had no bearing on his character. You know, and they weren't. It was just there, and it was. I thought it was ballsy, and then when you go back and you look at Michael Burnham and the fact that they're touting all of this, and I'll tell you something. I think they do more harm than good. You know, if you want to focus on certain aspects of people, then just have those people there. Make it matter of fact. Normalize it all. You know, I mean, it's like, anyway. But I think that reading a lot of what's been going on in comic books lately, it's like, who is this for? Who is your audience? Who is the audience that's been faithfully buying superhero comics for so long? Who are you servicing? Are you now going to service this minority contingent of the audience and make that who you're trying to? Are they buying comics? I don't know. But I think it's strange. Look, as I've said, I want everyone to have a voice, but everyone should have a voice not at the expense of the very thing that you want to tell a good Batman story. A good Batman story should be self-evident. What do I always say? Never put your universe before your characters and story. Never put your agenda before your characters and story. Your agenda should be baked into the story that you're telling. It should be a part of it. I go back, I guess that's because I was brought up on Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry, because of standards and practices, he couldn't tell a story about the Vietnam War. So he goes and he makes a private little war instead, where you've got the Klingons are arming the villagers and the Federation is forced into a situation. Do they arm the hill people so they can defend against what the Klingons are doing? They do a whole episode about, and Spock calls them the brush wars, and they did it that way. And then suddenly you're watching a really compelling story where the agenda has been hidden, but it's obviously still there. And I guess that's the kind of storytelling that I've always liked. I mean, if you want to tell these stories, tell the stories, but agenda-based storytelling, it's such a turnoff. Because it's like, what, your agenda is more important than the story? Your job is to tell a story. So tell a story. Tell a great story. Eduardo Cruz sends in a super chat and asks, he asks if I've ever read Elie Modesett. I have not. I have never, and I've seen the name my whole life pretty much, but I have not read any of the books. I guess you'd recommend them, yes? Where should I start? What should I look at? Nay sent in a super chat and says, I love Jackie Brown, but I still have a hard time understanding the story at the end. De Niro is great, though. Jackie Brown is great. I don't know. Is it hard to understand? Do we know what happens? It's a little convoluted, but most crime stories are. I think it's a great movie, though. It's so interesting because it's people forget that Jackie Brown's an adaptation, which I think is actually pretty interesting. De Niro is great in that movie. Mark C. sends in a super chat and says, Ethan has also said on numerous occasions to leave Cook's widow alone. Anybody doing so is there on their own accord. Well, that's lame. That's good that he's saying that. Paul Gilmore asks a very important question. Why does Criterion, Arrow, and Shout only have 4K scan restoration and not 4K UHD masters? Things that make me go, I think because their audience necessarily haven't gone to 4K yet. I mean, they must have some kind of marketing that says so. I really don't understand the economics. I really don't. It is frustrating to me. I'm working now. You know what I should ask? I'm working on obviously the Hills Run Red is being released by Shout Scream. I should ask why they don't do that. That's a question. I'll ask and see if I can get an answer. I don't know. I don't know why the 4K restorations are not. I don't know. Gerald sent in a super chat and says, Alison Pill's acting in Devs is extraordinary. So what happened to her in Star Trek Picard? I guess no actor can overcome terrible writing. I think Alison Pill is wonderful. And I mean, Alison Pill to me in Devs is a woman. I love stories about people that become untethered from the human experience. They've lost touch. Maybe not lost touch, but they're sort of unfettered by normal human concerns. And one of those characters is like obviously Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen, but in the Peter Weir movie Fearless, Jeff Bridges plays a guy who survives a plane crash, a commercial airliner crash, and in doing so, in facing death in that way, he sort of is he's no longer attached to our normal concerns. He's on a different plane because he's already faced this thing, and I always love that. And I feel that Alison Pill has become intellectually removed from. If you guys haven't seen Devs yet, go in cold and don't don't read anything about what it's about. I mean, all you really need to know is it's about a software company, a big tech company that's working on a secret project. And that's really all that you need to know. That's all you should know. And maybe I shouldn't talk about Alison Pill's character like that, but I feel that that's what I think. She's playing a person who has become just more aware of what's possible and understands the ramifications of all of this knowledge that we're acquiring and what it can mean and what it does mean. And I think her performance is great. It's very subdued, but I think she's great. I think, again, Red Letter Media did a teaser about about Plinkett's return and how Plinkett's going to review Picard. I can't wait to Mike at Red Letter Media. He and I definitely park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. And I first discovered Red Letter Media watching their Generations review, which I thought was so spot on. I was like, what is this? I mean, I thought it was great. I love their I love their reviews. But yeah, it's great. She's great. Let's see. You know what I promised? I might as well. I'm gonna jump right into this one. Let's just jump into it. I am going to. I'm going to read a letter. And let me find it. I have a Willow Yang letter, and it's a great one. Are you all ready, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to turn the floor over to Willow Yang. And she has written another great letter about a Star Trek episode. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Willow Yang. Greetings, Rob. I'm writing my thoughts on one of the more mature and graphic episodes of The Next Generation, the two-parter Chain of Command from the 6th season. By the way, I want to point out that we did do a Chain of Command disc of just those two episodes, and there's a great documentary we did with Ronnie Cox. We interviewed Ronnie Cox. Chain of Command. There are definitely episodes of Star Trek that didn't really work for me and feel a little dated, and then there are episodes I feel as if they could have been made yesterday. Chain of Command certainly falls into the latter category. The episode dealt with issues that we are still debating over to this day, probably most notably the use of torture. The creators weren't ambiguous about their stance on the subject either. Picard says point blank that torture has never been a reliable means of extracting information. It is ultimately self-defeating as a means of control. One wonders that it's still practiced. And we see how Gul Madred was almost able to coerce a false confession out of Picard through torture. It was quite surprising to me that people decades ago appear to have reached such a conclusion, whilst we continue on having the same debates now in our post-9/11 era. More than just showing that torture doesn't work, however, Chain of Command was particularly compelling in depicting the horrifying effects that such practices have on a person. Without being particularly violent and gory, the episode really excelled in making me feel uncomfortable by breaking down a character who was distinguished and revered. Picard wasn't some foolish teenager in a horror film who's going to get brutally murdered for the viewer's pleasure. He was Captain Jean-Luc Picard, and he was someone who was admired, who people looked up to and aspired to be. Seeing him being degraded, being stripped both literally and figuratively of his autonomy and dignity was incredibly awkward to watch. I remember in literature class a while back where the professor discussed the symbolism of clothes, and that when a person is naked, it becomes much harder to tell which class they belong to. Clothing can often serve as a symbol of status and power, and this applies to Starfleet uniforms, which denote a person's affiliation and rank. Captain Jellicoe even orders Troy to wear a proper uniform, a habit that she apparently appears to adopt in subsequent episodes. Picard's uniform was a part of his identity. It's something that everyone associates him with, and when he was stripped of it, we just see a frail man. It destroyed the aura of authority and mystique that he had had. Chain of Command centered on two major conflicts, the psychological battle between Picard and Madred, and the antagonism between Jellicoe and the main Enterprise crew. I really liked the two main guest stars that were brought on for the episodes. David Warner was magnetic as the creepy and sadistic yet pathetic Madred, who had to exercise power and control over his victims in order to compensate for his own insecurities. Ronnie Cox was equally engaging as Jellicoe, whose authoritative style of command puts him at odds with almost everyone on the ship, in particular Riker. The inevitable exchange between the two of them, where they aired out their grievances towards each other, was something that I've seen done many times before but never ceased to find entertaining. Even though the scenes on the Enterprise might not be as flashy as what was happening in the interrogation room, I found the conflict there to be no less engaging. Do you get the best out of people by being a hard-ass or by being more diplomatic? Was Jellicoe doing the right thing by denying the Federation's involvement and thereby denying Picard's rights as a prisoner of war? Again, I see the Federation delving into some morally gray zones, using deceptive tactics and being willing to sacrifice its own people in order to achieve advantage over a rival. Of course, the most quoted line from Chain of Command was uttered during a scene that was taken right out of George Orwell's 1984, when Picard, pressed one final time by Madred, hoarsely but defiantly shouts, "There are 4 lights!" It seemed to be a triumphant moment for humanity as Picard stood up against his captor and denied him from power. However, the victory was quickly revealed to be false, for a short time later, Picard confessed to Troy that Madred had actually succeeded in breaking him down, to the point where he really believed in the lie that he was being coerced to tell. Had it not been for the timely agreement between Jellicoe and Lamech, Picard would have gone the same way as Winston Smith. Unlike Winston, however, who is presented as a more ordinary character that the audience can see themselves in, Picard was supposed to represent the best of us, the greatest that humanity has to offer, which made his disintegration the more disconcerting. I admit that I haven't done any research into the conception of Chain of Command, and I don't know whether it was written to address a completely different matter at the time. However, as a modern viewer, it successfully reflects on the issues that we are still struggling with today. Have we needlessly tortured people for information that they did not have, or coerced false confessions via violence and intimidation? Do we have the right to subject other human beings to such inhumanity and degradation? It's a subject of conversation that remains relevant now, decades later. Live long and prosper, Willow. Well, Willow, I'm with you. I think Chain of Command is probably the finest, the two-parter is probably the finest episodes of Next Generation. It's easily my favorite two-parter of the series. I think it does what Star Trek does best, delving into real-world situations. It's not even that allegorical, but it is a very nuanced, very well-written episode, and one of the producers who came on board the 6th season was one of the architects of that episode, who we also interviewed. He now sells real estate in Santa Barbara, believe it or not. He's retired from writing. But that was all based on reality, real experiences that had happened, and that's where he got that from, and it was directly addressing things like Amnesty International's concerns, and it was... I mean, it might have been a little bit on the nose, but I don't think so. I think both of those things are great. And like you, I'm glad to hear you say, I've always loved the Captain Jellicoe stuff because I think Captain Jellicoe is right. And it's always bothered me when Riker's talking about there's no joy in what he does. And it's interesting to me that Riker felt that he needed to have joy. Jellicoe's a wartime captain. He was put on board the Enterprise to get one thing done, and he needed the kind of discipline amongst the crew. This was not an exploratory mission. This was a mission that was going to be it was going to be a crackerjack mission where you're balancing on the edge of a straight razor, and unless you have somebody that really knows what they're doing, and Jellicoe knew how to deal with the Cardassians, he could not have for a minute anyone that would ever question what he was doing. And I think, and by the way, he was correct. And yes, the Federation have to deal with, here's one of the things that is a misconception with Star Trek. A lot of Star Trek fans have, and it's thrown at me a lot about Deep Space Nine and episodes like Chain of Command. Everyone is saying that, well, episodes like that, those morally ambiguous areas, those gray areas really betray Roddenberry's utopian ideals. And I'm like, but they don't. Those episodes are about how does a utopian civilization, a utopian federation, how do you deal with a universe that is not? Not everybody, when you're dealing with, say, the Dominion, when you have shapeshifters, their experience of the world, of the universe, is bent on destroying the solids who have always victimized them. They haven't met maybe the Federation. If they had met the Federation and they were the Federation was the first solids the founders met, there might not have been a war. But how do you maintain your utopian ideals in the face of conflict, in the face of a galactic conflict that you didn't ask for? And I don't find that to be dark. I find that to be, all belief systems should be tested, and they should stand up to close scrutiny. And I think that while, war causes ambiguity and moral gray areas and all kinds, it's something to absolutely be avoided. But if you can't avoid war, the way to fight it is to hopefully be able to hang on to those ideals that you believe so fervently in and not let them slip away. And I think Chain of Command is a great example of that. Even in the worst situations, you've got Captain Jellicoe trying to do what he does, and he's right. And Will Riker is absolutely wrong in that instance. Obviously, if you're an exploratory vessel, you don't necessarily have to have the same kind of command style that Jellicoe is exercising in Chain of Command, but that's because the mission is different. But for Jellicoe's mission, he needed the crew to be a certain way. He needed them to be frosty, and that any moment could spell their doom, and he got through. I love the scene. I love, by the way, Ronnie Cox, how Ronnie Cox plays that character. They talk about, let's make a spin-off show about Pike. I would love to have seen, hell, Ronnie Cox is still alive. He's probably too old now, but I would love to have seen a Jellicoe spin-off. I would love to have seen, he's out there, tied into Section 31 where the tough choices have to be made by guys like Jellicoe. I think that would have been dope. But, it's great. So good. That's right up there. So I want to thank you, Willow, for sending that in. What a great letter that you've written there too, because it's awesome that you did that. Another letter from our Dean Mikitich. Dean Mikitich writes in from the UK. How about Boris Johnson's recovery? Dean says, "Hi, Rob, in the Post-Geek Singularity. The other day you were talking about spy TV shows and their theme tunes. I found this a little funny, as a few days before I posted the Knight Rider theme on the Facebook page and asking people for their favorite 80s TV show theme tunes. As you can guess, the response was where the big shows at the time, A-Team, Airwolf, Magnum PI, and etc. With the subject being brought back up, this got me thinking about TV themes and movie themes as well. If someone was to hum the first few bars of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Jaws, Beverly Hills Cop, just to name a few. Like the shows mentioned above, they're instantly recognizable and or reckonable, as you say, I reckon. And everyone knows them. And if the show was a favorite of theirs, they may end up humming it themselves. That's just from the 80s. Yes, I know Jaws came out in the 70s, but I was not born then, so I did not see it until the late 80s. There are lots of great themes from the 60s and 70s, not just from TV, but film as well. Lost in Space, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, Rocky, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Just a small sample of great themes. Dun 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 dun. I love the Thunderbird theme. But since the Double O's, I don't think there's been an iconic film theme tune that everyone knows. There are one or two like the Avengers, but outside the MCU, I've been trying to rack my brain, and I can't even think of one off the top of my head. Even the Disney Star Wars trilogy does not have an iconic theme. Yes, it uses themes from the original trilogy, but there's nothing memorable that seeps into you. But I agree with that. The scores are good. After all, it is John Williams who gave us some of the great themes from the 80s, but the Disney trilogy is not his best work. The prequel trilogy had a few gems, and everyone knows Duel of the Fates from The Phantom Menace, which blows me away when I first heard it in the trailer for that film. A shame the film did not live up to that piece of music, though it was still enjoyable. TV shows are also failing to do this. I love the theme to Westworld, but if you asked me to hum it, I wouldn't be able to do so. Now, don't get me wrong, there have been some iconic theme tunes in the last 20 years. Big Bang Theory, a show that started off great but lost it toward the end. Game of Thrones, which everyone and their dog knows that theme, but there does not seem to be as much as there used to be. Maybe it's my age, as I'm turning 40 this year, and the theme tunes are not sticking with me as much as they used to, even though I do listening to the orchestral score for a movie. Rob, is it just me, or are there less iconic theme tunes to movies and TV shows these days? If it's not just me, why do you think that is? I know music tastes have changed with time, but a theme tune that gets into the soul of audiences will become iconic and memorable. So why the current TV shows and movies are unable to do this? Finally, Rob, given that you are such a big fan of Star Trek, what is your favorite opening TV theme from that franchise? While I do love the original series theme, it has to be Deep Space Nine. Even the revamped theme for season 4 and onward, will the change of peace, the theme, it suited the direction the show was taking, and the show did not disappoint. Regards, Dean Mikitich. Well, Dean, what a great question. You know what? Where's my phone? I am very good friends with Lucas Kendall. Obviously, he made Skyfighter, but Lucas Kendall had a soundtrack label, and he also published Film Score Monthly. He might have to pick up his kids. I don't know what he's doing. I'm going to call him, and because Lucas has a lot to say about this. I'm going to call him right now. And he could probably give you a much better answer than I can. And let's see. I'll call him. He might not answer. He might not pick up. But we shall see if Lucas Kendall is at home, because he has the great answer for this. Because he was telling me about this not, 6 months ago. Oh, he's not going to pick up.
Hi there.
Lucas, so I'm live on my show.
Oh, cool.
And I'm calling you because Dean Mikitich from the UK asks, why do I think that there aren't as many memorable themes to movies and television the way there used to be in the days of yore, when things were hummable? He brought up things like, well, the Game of Thrones theme is good, but he can't really think of any modern themes in movies, like whether it's Back to the Future or Star Wars or Jaws. And I figured you're the man to call, because you and I were talking about this very thing, and you had pretty interesting, especially about putting pen to paper and actually writing music. But do you have a good?
There are many.
Do you have time?
So there are many contributing factors. One is that today special effects are so amazing that the storytelling is so explicitly visual, whereas when you and I were younger, the visual effects couldn't do that, so they relied a lot more on music to convey more of the storytelling. A lot of things were not seen. Things were a lot quieter, a lot slower paced, and they needed more they needed more musical narrative storytelling. Another thing that happened is that the style of music has changed from something that was primarily symphonic or instrumental to something that with computers sort of anybody can make, and you can kind of garage band it. And as this aesthetic change has happened, filmmakers and audiences have come to want music to be much more subliminal and much more like sound design and much less explicit the way it used to be, where scores that are much more thematic and sort of flamboyantly melodic are relegated to comedies because people would think it's overly dramatic, and people just don't expect to have the music goosing the drama. So it's a change that happened in the culture as people got used to different types of music, and as technology has created dance music and created rap music and hip hop and electronics. I mean, now it's very possible. It's very easy for somebody to score something in a computer, and until 35 years ago, that was not possible.
Now,
so there's just a lot of sea changes of aesthetics and culture have happened.
Is there particular composers that are working today that you're a big fan of?
Oh, sure.
Who are some of your favorites, and what would be an example of, say, a score that's particularly impressed you of late?
Well, I like the Game of Thrones guy who was also doing Westworld. Ramin Djawadi, I think.
Yeah.
Ramin, I don't even know how to pronounce it.
He also did the score for Pacific Rim, which I loved.
He did. He's very good. The guy who did Mr. Robot, Matt Quayle, is very good. Bear McCreary is very good. McCreary. Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Doing 4 shows at once all the time. I think the guy who does Jordan Peele's movies is very good. Michael, what's his name? I can't remember now. But Yeah, there are a lot of people who are still good. The woman who did Jackie and did Mika Levy and did Under the Skin is fabulous. There are a lot of electronic, more electronic-based composers who I think are very interesting. It's just much different. And then there's still composers who've been around a long time who are still reliably good and great. Danny Elfman, Thomas Newman, Howard Shore. They don't seem to work as much as maybe they used to. Danny Elfman. So there are lots of good composers, but it's not what it was when we were kids, and it's not going to be. And now, Rob, you're going to have to excuse me because I got to adjust the TV for my kids.
All right. Thanks for the insight.
You're welcome. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that was kind of fun. Lucas is one of the most knowledgeable people about film scores, as you can imagine. His label, Film Score Monthly, has put out, Silver Score, whatever he put out. I mean, unbelievable amounts of scores. Just amazing, amazing stuff. This next one comes from Joe Geiger, who says, "Greetings from Minnesota once again, Rob. I hope you're doing well. I write to this time wondering when the deadline for consideration is regarding video submissions for episode 400. I've had a project of sorts that I've been stuck on for a while now, and perhaps the prospect of having it ready for your upcoming milestone would incentivize me enough. That project is a plot point breakdown of an Avengers movie that struck just a bit truer to the comedic origins of the team, or the comic origins of the team. I would enjoy the opportunity to share it with the Post-Geek Singularity in a dramatic reading format." You can do that. I hope it's not too long. And yeah, I mean, why not send it in? I would say I need about 2 days. I need about 2 days in advance. So like 8 days from now. And I will still consider it. So that would be the easiest way to do that. Yeah, so that would be it. This one comes from Matt Van Bylen. Matt Van Bylen, I think it's, or Bulin, it's B-Y-L-Y. I think it's Matt Van Bylen, writes in and says, "I was quite surprised when you answered my super chat about Peter Jackson's troubles with the Hobbit movies. He had zero time to prep these movies. That's a fact. It was not his fault at all." Well, okay, look, I mean, obviously, he was working with Guillermo del Toro. I mean, they all were working together. It wasn't like it was a vacuum. Yeah, he stepped in and took over as the director, but and it was moving forward. But having covered the Lord of the Rings movies, I think the movies that we got were the movies that Peter Jackson wanted to give us. Sure, he stepped in very quickly, but it's not like he stepped in from a space vacuum where he'd never dealt with these movies before. And yeah, he probably didn't have enough. He obviously didn't have the time that he had with Lord of the Rings to ruminate and decide what it was he was going to be doing. But I still don't think that, I wouldn't call it his fault, because I think the Hobbit movies have some incredible filmmaking and they were doing some very innovative things. I think the problem with the Hobbit movies is the tone. And the biggest problem with the Hobbit movies is you've taken one book that's a pretty simple children's story and expanded it to this 3-film behemoth that tells this epic story. And I don't necessarily think that it needed to be the way it was. I mean, obviously the pressure was on. Everybody wanted it to make as much money as the Lord of the Rings, and they did, by the way, a pretty good job of that. I don't think it was ever going to make as much money but for splitting a children's book into 3 movies like they did. I mean, you get to the Battle of the 5 Armies and you're like, well, okay. But yeah, so I wouldn't call it his fault. I mean, remember, they weren't only going to make 2 movies. They ended up making 3. So, and it took them, they made those movies over the space of 3 years. I just think that the very idea of making them as big, I think the mistake was, whether it was Guillermo del Toro doing it or Peter Jackson doing it, was not the prep time that he had. It was the idea that they wanted to turn this one book into multiple movies, whether it was 2 or 3, and they had to expand it and make it bigger and show you all these things. And I think that's the problem. And I think that if it's a problem at all, a lot of people love those movies. I just think for me, tonally, they're all over the place. So, but it's interesting. I mean, I don't think you're wrong. He did jump into that. it did happen very, very quickly. So you're not wrong, but I don't necessarily think there's a problem because those movies did very, very well, and they made a lot of money. Our old friend Enterprise HNCC 1701H is here. Derider of the Dark. Greetings. Thank you for reading my last letter, although I must admit that out of all the letters that I sent, I was surprised that you picked that one. I figured you'd cover letters which were gushing with positivity about things that I liked. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, I suppose. That is something to remember for people I see pop up from time to time complaining that there's too much negativity. My point was more about how we should hold our own parties accountable and not be blind partisans who trust whatever our side is doing. I would hope that Star Trek fans are beyond such two-dimensional thinking. Negativity may bring about positivity. I've always thought so. A bit of a treat to show that I'm not at all negative. Could you please give me your opinion on the game trailer that I sent you? As a fellow imagination connoisseur and sommelier of sci-fi, I'd like to know how my recommendations in imagination are received. If the same time is shown in any previous letter, it is probably the same link. Well, I don't know. I'll put this. I don't even know what this is, but you know what? I'll watch it real quick to see what it is. Let's see. It's a game trailer for Rise of Legends that I can tell you right now. Wow. Well, I'm in. You've had me at you have me at oh wait, is this an ad? No, it's so this is a link for Rise of Legends, and this is not a new link. This link was put up. There's only 131 subscribers. It's cinematic. Wow, it's created by Blur Studios. I'll put this in here, but it was posted in 2000, almost 10 years ago. So just that alone, if it's done by Blur and this, I'm in. Count me in. I put it in the live chat. Check it out. So there you go. You can definitely see, although my lights are flickering on and off. I don't know why that is. Who knows? It's strange. But anyway, so there you go. Omar94 sends in another letter. Hi, Rob. Actually, Omar sends in. I'm going to read these quickly because they're short and they kind of are back to back. Hi, Rob. My previous letter had movie recommendations that were about movies. I mentioned The Purple Rose of Cairo, The Barefoot Contessa, Bad and the Beautiful, and Cinema Paradiso, but there is one more movie I forgot to add, so I wanted to bring it up here. It's Joe Dante's Matinee with John Goodman about a film promoter releasing a horror film during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I love Matinee. And yes, and then you go on to say, whatever happened to Martin Brest? His last movie was Gigli, and since then he disappeared off the face of the earth. I don't blame him for Gigli, as that movie got taken away from his control by Revolution Studios. I know failure hurts, but I didn't think he would just disappear. M. Night Shyamalan had a bad track record starting with Lady in the Water, and he still made movies. He eventually made Split, which brought him back to form. Do you think he will come back? I hope he does, as everyone loves a good comeback. And also, despite Gigli being his last movie and not being very good, he's made 3 great films: Beverly Hills Cop, Midnight Run, and Scent of a Woman. He also made Meet Joe Black, and I think he made The Sunshine Boys. I'm a huge... Oh, thanks, and live long and prosper. I'm a huge Martin Brest fan. As a matter of fact, I met Martin Brest in 1984 in Seattle, and I interviewed him for my high school newspaper. And he was a terrific interview, and thank you to Louise Hathaway from Seattle's Thunder Media, who hooked up that interview for me. Louise Hathaway was somebody who saw my friend Shade Roop and I at all of these screenings, and she's like, how do you kids get into all these screenings? And we told her that we would go to these, we knew people as high school film fanatics in Seattle. So we went to all the screenings. We could get into all the screenings. And so suddenly she ran this publicity company, and she told people that I wrote a syndicated column for multiple high school newspapers. I didn't, but she told people that. And she got me in to do interviews with people like Martin Brest on Beverly Hills Cop, which I love. I'm a huge Martin Brest fan. I can't imagine. He must have been so demoralized because he was such a great talent. I would love to see him come back. I have no idea how old Martin Brest is now, but it would be, let's see, shall we? Let's find out. I don't know where Martin Brest. Wow, I spelled it wrong. Martin Brest. He's 68 years old. He was born in the Bronx in New York. He went to Stuyvesant High School, and he went to the New York School of the Arts in '73. 2009, his New York University student film "Hot Dogs for Gauguin" was the artist, I would imagine, one of the 25 films chosen for the National Film Registry for the Library of Congress. Wow. Oh, it wasn't The Sunshine Boys. It was Going in Style. That's what he made. It was Going in Style in '79. Yeah. Wow. And it's funny. Son of a Woman, Josh and Sam, and Meet Joe Black, and then he made Gigli and hasn't made anything since. That's a bummer, man. I don't know. Maybe whatever happened to Martin Brest? Let's go find him. Maybe I'll go find him and have him on the show. Wouldn't that be fun? I don't know if I can. I don't know anybody. You can do anything. Anything can be done. People can just say no. Jeffrey Mao wrote a letter, ladies and gentlemen. Jeffrey Mao sent in a letter. Jeffrey Mao says, "Greetings, Rob. I just this morning finished watching one of your favorites, William Friedkin's 1985 crime film To Live and Die in L.A., starring William Peterson and Willem Dafoe. This film also is based on the novel by Gerald Petovich and is adapted to the screen by Friedkin himself. This was the Shout Select Blu-ray with a new 4K transfer supervised by Friedkin as well. As usual, this won't be a formal review per se, but some of my thoughts and impressions on the film. Since it's an older film, I don't feel that there's any particular need to withhold spoilers, but I will have one section that I will label as a spoiler. If you read this on air, you can choose to skip over that section. I've been filling in a few holes in my 1980s film history, and for some reason or another, I never watched this film, but I was always very aware of it. I was, as a kid, under the impression that the chase inside the airport where Peterson's character, Rick Chance, is after John Turturro's Carl Cody was part of the climax. You can't call him Rick Chance because it's Rick Masters and Richard Chance. Maybe it was because they showed that scene in the commercial or something, because I clearly remember the shot of Chance running on top of the walkway. He does. It's badass when he does that too, even now. Mid-1980s R-rated films were hit or miss for me to see. Obviously, I was too young to see them in the theater. I still remember my mom covering my eyes during the brain-eating scene in Temple of Doom. At least she took you, though. I would have likely seen those films on cable or VHS later on, but To Live and Die in L.A. just fell through the cracks. In terms of how this film translates to today, and if a younger viewer were to watch it, I think it holds up pretty well. It doesn't date as poorly as other films of the period do, even though the famous score composed by Wang Chung doesn't sound too 80s to me. Although it was a very 80s thing to get a current band to compose a film score, I guess. But the scenes, the composition, the action, the dialogue, the acting, nothing really takes you out of it too much. About the only thing that's either a little cringy or laugh-inducing is that dance performance club that Willem Dafoe's character, Rick Masters, goes to meet his girlfriend. But because, like you said, the settings in the film are pretty much on the grungy side of LA, it's probably not the same as if a younger person saw Beverly Hills Cop now for the first time. About the only thing that's probably a little jarring is seeing Willem Dafoe so young, looking as we're all so used to his grizzled, crazy look now. What's interesting is that he actually plays Masters pretty low-key and quiet, which makes his performance all the more menacing. His over-the-top stuff would come later. Story-wise, it's pretty straightforward. Richard Chance is a young Secret Service agent whose veteran partner on the verge of retiring gets killed by Rick Masters. A bit cliche, but it gets the story going. The master counterfeiter who's been elusive to capture. Chance, bent on revenge, goes above and beyond the law to take down Masters. Here's the setup to the famous Wrong Way car chase. Chance and his reluctant new partner, John Vukovich, go undercover to set up a deal with Masters. They need $50,000 to buy in. The Secret Service won't give them more than $10,000. Chance's informant girlfriend, Ruth, tips him off that a Chinese diamond dealer is coming to town carrying the cash he needs. He drags Vukovich into ripping off the dealer. Unbeknownst to them, the dealer is actually an undercover FBI agent, and after stealing the money, they're relentlessly pursued by gunmen on foot and in cars. They don't know the cars are feds, although it should have dawned on them that this was the case. Nevertheless, they escape, and they somehow manage to return their car to the motor pool only with the fixed rear window. This car must have been the Blues Brothers special with cop tires, cop brakes, cop engine and cop suspension. It took more abuse than I think a Humvee could take, but otherwise the filming of the car chase is stunning work and would not be equal until Ronin some 13 years later. I love Ronin. Okay, I'm gonna skip over the what you did say spoilers. I'm gonna skip over that. Here are what other tidbits I noticed. When Chance goes to see Ruth, played by Darlene Flugel, for the first time, he goes in and grabs a beer. Ruth asks who's there. Who else would she have expected to walk into her house? Well, you never know. As they prepare to have sex, Ruth gets up from the bed and walks toward Chance. It sure doesn't look like William Peterson is wearing any kind of privacy pouch or whatever it's called. No, he's not. My boy. Afterwards, Chance slicks back his hair and Ruth puts on stockings like she's going to work. However, the next scene is still in her house, probably later in the day. Chance's hair is not slicked anymore, but Ruth has changed clothes into a shirt and jeans. Yeah, but it's gone. The day's gone. Peterson's bow legs are almost distracting, especially when he's walking straight ahead. No, it's awesome. I love his bow-legged swagger. It's the best. Especially the best is when he's wearing jeans and his favorite sports t-shirt, his favorite team shirt when they're drinking, when Petovich is drinking after he's gone base jumping, and he's walking into his car to get Vukovic's his partner Jimmy Hart. He's getting Jimmy Hart's retirement present. I mean, nobody has ever swaggered bow-legged the way he does into his truck. It's the best. I love it. I'm not. My man crushes are not extreme, but man, I was so gay for William Peterson in that movie. I don't know, there's just something about him and part of that is his bow-legged walk and the fact that he's not afraid to show his package. You got to love that guy. It's just the best. I know I said that there weren't many 80s moments in this film, but the scene where Chance and Vukovich meet Masters at his gym is pretty funny. Since I lift weights, I always like to notice weightlifting or gym scenes in films. The ones from the 80s and 90s are the most egregious. I don't think Peterson knows how to do a V-bar tricep pushdown at all. The one meathead in the back is doing some kind of weird combination bicep curl and front raise. There's the obligatory big hair, fake boob chick in a leotard doing who knows what. Masters claims that he goes to the club 3 or 4 times a week. It sure isn't to do any weightlifting. Well, those are my thoughts on the film. I hope this inspires others to go check it out if they haven't done so before. Thank you, Jeffrey Mao. Well, Jeff, thank you for watching one of my favorite movies of the 80s. I just think To Live and Die in L.A. is a ferocious thriller that I really like, and I like that you watched it. That's absolutely extraordinary. Well, there's a few more tips and super chats that have come in. Twin Flicks says, "Hey Rob, big fan. I'm curious if there's any way I can get you to watch a fun little trip unboxing video for the Skywalker Saga box set. We had fun with this one, and I think you'll get a kick out of it." Well, I'll watch it, but you didn't send me a link. Send me a link. I'll put it in the live chat right now. Francisco Matalana, I think so. Rob, hi Rob, who do you think would have made a great Batman Bruce Wayne? I think Thomas Jane. I just started watching The Expanse, and it's amazing sci-fi. You know what, he played the Punisher. I love Thomas Jane. He's just got one of those cool faces that looks like he could be a comic book character. I mean, he's got that great chiseled jaw. I think that Guy Pearce would have made a great superhero character. And I'll tell you something, Russell Crowe in his Maximus Decimus Meridius days and his Gladiator days, svelte Russell Crowe could have been a kick-ass Bruce Wayne. I mean, look at L.A. Confidential, man, and look at Gladiator. I mean, Russell Crowe could have kicked unholy ass. I would have loved that. It would have been great. It'd be fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have work that I have to do, so I am going to bring Robservations episode number 390 to an end. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank everybody for their generous support of this channel. And however you want to do it, please send me more letters. Obviously, send me videos for the 400th show, which is in 10 days. Whatever you want, and any suggestions you have for the 400th show or the channel moving forward, please don't hesitate to send them to me. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mayor Mike Bodden of Riverdale, Iowa. Of course, Detective Jim Boyers, Greg Smith, Jordy Lyons, and Lewis Yu. I hope Lewis is feeling better. He was under the weather. I hope he's feeling good now. Thank these gentlemen for doing everything that they do, because they're fantastic gentlemen, and these lights are flickering. But what can you do? But anyway, I want to thank them for all the work they do. And of course, tonight, Elizaviews whining about the movies. I think we're on episode 14. Kind Hearts and Coronets, 1949's Kind Hearts and Coronets, where Alec Guinness plays 9 different roles. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, 9 different roles, which is frankly kind of amazing. 9 different roles, 9 times. So watch that. We'll be on at 8 o'clock sharing a bottle of wine, talking about Kind Hearts and Coronets, which is a lovely, lovely film. If you like these chats, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and all of those things. You can do that. And, people have been asking me about my Patreon. Not that people don't support the channel enough, but, I've kind of forgotten about my Patreon. There's still people. I still have a few patrons, but I was thinking about doing, I don't know if people are into that. People still do, like Patreon. I was going to start doing, like Elizabeth and I were going to do, people have asked us to do more videos, not just movie reviews, but like, we could do questions together. I don't know. Maybe I'll do those Patreon only. I don't know. What do people think about that? I don't know what people think about that. I'm curious. Send in letters. Tell me what you think. So yeah. And I'll be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. I will be back here tomorrow, probably once again at 1 o'clock. I think that's a pretty good time. But yeah, we are sheltering. There are shelter-at-home orders from the mayor of L.A. until May 15th. So I'm going to keep it all coming. And I'm not going to skip a day, I don't think. There's no big holidays coming up, so I'll keep going. And I very much appreciate all the support. But hit like, hit subscribe, and all those things. And with that, I say to all of you, remember, every person you meet, you know what I forgot to say when I started the show? That I was Robcasting at you from the Robservatory. I can't believe I forgot that. But every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, gentle beings, kind people, all of you from the 28 known galaxies, I will say Robservations episode number 390, oh my God, is coming to an end. And as always, have a better day. And as I always say, I mean that.